Exodus. Let's go. God is drawing us out, and then he's drawing us in. You're going to hear me say that a lot. And you might even remember, going, I remember that from 2017. Yeah, that's the book of Exodus in a nutshell. God drawing us out of darkness, out of sin, out of bondage, drawing us into the light, into relationship with him, into family. So this kind of resonates with what Pastor Al spoke last week. We had a guest speaker, Pastor Al Johnson from the Well Community Church. My family was just driving back from the Grand Canyon. Thank you that we got to spend that quality time together. We missed you. We're glad to be back. And Pastor Al talked about God gathering and scattering. Like he's gathering his people, and then he's sending them out, scattering them. We gather together. We love God. We love each other. We serve with humility. And then we go out into the world so that we can love God, love each other, and tell others how they can serve with humility if they don't know a loving God yet. So he's drawing us into relationship with him. So now let's go with the question, what's new? What's new? And we get to the book of Exodus. This is the second book in the Bible. So we've got through all of the old in the beginning stuff. We've got the creation. We got the first sin. We got the flood. We got Noah's Ark. We got Joseph who goes to the pit, to the prison, Potiphar's house, all this alliteration that we use when we study Joseph. And Joseph leads his family into the land of Egypt where there had been famine. Now there's feast in Egypt, so he brings all his family in. But now what's new? There's a new generation. Years and years after Joseph and all of his brothers have passed away, there's more Israelites multiplying. They're being fruitful and multiplying in the land of Egypt. When we think about this promise that God made to Father Abraham. And Father Abraham, we know him, he had many what? Sons, and many sons had Father Abraham, And so Father God promised that Abraham will make you a father. You'll be as numerous as the dust on the ground and the stars in the sky. And to use the dust as an analogy, since we said we just came back from the Grand Canyon, there will be dust in our shoes and in our house and in our car forever. The amount of dust kind of gives you an incredible picture of God's promise. I'm promising you, I will give you even more descendants than that. They will be uncountable, innumerable. God's promising, and this promise will be fulfilled. But, dun, 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 there's a new Pharaoh in the land. He does not remember Joseph. He doesn't know anything about that promise, and he's actually trying to stop God's promise. How's he going to do that? This new Pharaoh, he emerges. He's unfamiliar or unwilling to acknowledge God's saving activity through Jacob's family. And this new Pharaoh, he is a monster, he is a racist, he is a murderer. So this brings about, what else is new? New suffering. There's new suffering. The children of God, they went from being shepherds to slaves to like victims in bondage. And listen and notice the words of the suffering in this passage. From Exodus chapter 1, 11 and 12. So the Egyptians assigned taskmasters over the Israelites to oppress them with forced labor. But the more they oppressed them, the more they multiplied and spread so that the Egyptians came to dread the Israelites. They worked the Israelites ruthlessly, made their lives bitter with difficult labor in brick and mortar and all kinds of field work. They ruthlessly imposed all this work on them. But did all of this hard work on them keep them from the being fruitful and multiplying? Like if you think about maybe your grandparents or your parents had like 8 kids. Like how in the world did you ever have time to have like 5 jobs and 8 kids? Somehow you just made it work and kept multiplying, being fruitful and multiplying. So this evil Pharaoh Egyptian, he decides that if he can't work the people to death, he's just going to death them to death. I'm going to kill them to death. So he puts out the unspeakable, horrible order. And this will bring about new heroes. And the new heroes, a couple of them are given names here. We got Shiphrah. Shiphrah is a midwife. Her name means fair. And Puah. Puah means splendid. So we got fair and splendid come on the scene here. When the king said to the Hebrew midwives, the first whose name was Shiphrah and the second whose name was Puah, when you help the Hebrew women give birth, observe them as they deliver. If the child is a son, kill him. But if it's a daughter, she may live. Have you ever had a bad day at work? We all have. Your bad day at work never was marching orders from the higher-ups to say, kill the baby boys. What would you do in the face of such an unthinkable task? Well, let's see why we got these new heroes. Shiphrah and Puah, the midwives. Exodus 1, verse 17. The midwives, however, feared God. We know that the fear of the Lord our God is the beginning of all wisdom. So these women are incredibly wise. They feared God. They did not do as the king of Egypt had told them. They let the boys live. So the king summoned the midwives and asked them, why have you done this and let the boys live? Their response? The midwives said to Pharaoh, the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, for they are vigorous, and they give birth before the midwives can get to them. Two observations here. There's many more than two, but let's go with two. First off, in that little jab at the Egyptian women, we're more vigorous than you. We just pop them out. Second observation, did they tell a lie? Uh-huh. A little white lie? A little twit, like, what will God do? Well, let's see what God does in the face of this. Because so God was good to the midwives. Because they feared God. This was a lie, but it was a lie because they feared God and not the oppressive Pharaoh. Their love of God, and they didn't want to offend God by taking the life that God gave. So they're gonna spin it in a way that shows their allegiance to God over man. So Exodus 1, starting in verse 20. So God was good to the midwives, and the people multiplied. They keep multiplying, and he became very numerous. So the midwives feared God, and he gave them families. Pharaoh then commanded all his people, you must throw every son born to the Hebrews into the Nile, but let every daughter live. So Pharaoh orders all the baby boys to be thrown into the river. But one mom put her baby boy in this little floating basket, kind of like a little mini lifeboat or an ark. We see a repetition of a theme here. They put the little baby in the little ark, little baby Moses. And as he's floating down through the Nile, Pharaoh's daughter comes to bathe, and she sends one of her assistants, go check that out. What is that? And it's a little boy, and she recognizes this is one of the little Hebrew boys. And she has like compassion. And not too far off in the bushes is little Moses' little sister. Her name's Miriam. And she's so just inspired by how God lines this up in ways that shows his care. That Moses' mama will now be the nursemaid to her little baby boy that would have been drowned. And so there's like this neat theme of like strong, powerful, and authority women over the evil Pharaoh. Like Moses' mother, sister, Pharaoh, the daughter. There's a theme here. And so as they take Moses from the water, Pharaoh's daughter gives him the name Moses because it means to draw out. In Hebrew, Moses means to draw out. In Egyptian, it sounds a lot like born of or son of. So he's drawn up, born out of this river. And so every time we read the name Moses, I hope we think drawn out so we can remember what Moses and the book of Exodus is all about. It's all about God draws us out and draws us in. So Moses was born like under an edict of death, and he's miraculously spared in Egypt. This sounds like someone else if we keep reading to the New Testament. Someone else born under an edict of death. Herod said, kill all the baby boys if there's one that's going to threaten my throne. But yet Jesus was miraculously spared. And so let this be a moment where we don't just take history, because history is awesome. Love history. And those who don't learn history are doomed to repeat it. So if we just look at Exodus as a historical accurate account of the Israelites, then we failed to apply it. So let's have history applied here. What has God drawn us out of? If we're going to get any traction in the whole rest of the book of Exodus, we got to honestly ask the question, what is God drawing us out of? And what is God drawing us into? What's God drawing you out of? Just a few things? Maybe it's this prevalent thought right now, just eat, drink, and be merry. Tomorrow we're going to die. Go ahead and get yours now while you can. It's also known as the if it makes you happy theory. It can't be that bad. So eat, drink, be merry. This is, and I'm like, okay, you're like, hey, it's Father's Day. We're about to go to lunch. We're going to feast. And I know that. I'm not saying that's not a beautiful moment to celebrate. But if that becomes your God, you put all of your dependency on just, I got to eat, drink, and be merry. I got to take care of me. If I'm not happy, you're making yourself your own little God. The true God is drawing us out of our attempt to be God. Because the eat, drink, and be merry mentality, that's like prime breeding ground for addictions and debt. And maybe that's what God's drawing you out of. He's drawing you out of these addictions. Our addictions say, one more, and I'll be satisfied. And that one more mentality leads us deeply into like debt and this desire for one more of. Like you fill in the blank. It's sick the amount of things we can become addicted to. Don't answer out loud. Save those moments for confession before we come to the Lord's table for communion. What's God drawing you out of? Because in the end, it all leads to death. When we boil it right down to it, God is drawing us out of death. It's not a matter of you were sick and God made you better. It's a matter of you were dead and God made you alive. Don't take my word for it, take God's word for it. Colossians chapter 2, verse 13. And when you were, that word is what? Dead. Not sick, not feeling a little under the weather, not, hey, I'm just going to do my own thing for a little while. No, you were dead in your trespasses and in the uncircumcision of your flesh. God made you, what's that word? Alive. He made you alive with him and he forgave you all of your trespasses. So isn't this what we celebrate when we celebrate baptism? Holy baptism together? Like Romans 6:24 would reiterate this even more. Therefore we were buried with him by baptism into death, in order that, just as Christ was raised from the dead by the glory of God the Father, so we too may walk in the newness of life. So every baptism is a celebration of how God rescued us, how God draws us out from death that we deserve because of the sins that we've embraced, and God draws us in to walk in the newness of life. So what's God drawing you into? It's rescue. He's rescuing you from all those things that lead to death. And then he's recruiting you into the work that he's doing. It's God saying, I'm going to bring my kids into my work. Does he need us to get the work done? No, he can do it all himself. But he's basically saying, hey, hold this flashlight. Watch me go to work. Learn from me how to do this. Know that my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Know that my work has eternal consequences and it won't be burned up by the flames. Know that this work is good work. Let's get together in the kingdom work. God's drawing us into this. He's recruiting us into this. Just like God drew Moses out of a death sentence. And God also drew Moses out of this royal life in Egypt. God drew Moses into the wilderness and into a faithful family of shepherds. God was preparing Moses for this work, for something remarkable. And if we traced all of our life stories and our histories and we shared them, we could see maybe an imprint of what God is doing, going, man, God's preparing me for this work. Or I could have never done that work if I hadn't walked through that valley.
Heaven come, let heaven come, let heaven come, let heaven heaven come. Let heaven come. Let heaven come. Let heaven come. Let heaven come. Sing, yours is the kingdom, yours is the power, yours is the glory forever. Amen. Yours is the kingdom, yours is the power, yours is the glory forever. Amen. Yours is the kingdom, yours is the power, yours is the glory forever. Amen. Amen. Forever, amen. Forever, amen. Forever, amen. Let heaven come. Let heaven come. Let heaven come. Yours is the kingdom. Yours is the power. Yours is the glory